Let's begin the regular meeting of the Moines City Council. And Scotty, would you lead us in a pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have one council member absent on a business trip. That's Dave Kaplan. Is there a motion to excuse?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Dan, I'll recognize that. And Ed, a second.
Mm-hmm.
All in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Tony, is there any correspondence today?
No, Your Honor.
May I have the list of those who may have signed up? Thank you.
I don't think so.
At this time, we welcome comments from the public. As your name is called, would you please come over to the podium over here to my right, state your full name and address for the record, and please leave no more than 3 minutes for your comments. The first person is Jan Landy. I hope I pronounced that right.
Good evening. My name is Jan Landy, and I live at 421 South 284th Street in Des Moines, which is actually Redondo. And I just want to thank you so much, Mayor Sheckler and council members, for letting me speak this evening.
Oh, sure.
My husband and I have lived in Redondo for over 20 years. We've raised 3 children there, and the last 2 or 3 years, the noise and the absolute partying that goes on in Wooten Park has gotten out of hand. We call the police on the average of 1 or 2 nights a week. Last night it was 2 o'clock in the morning. What bothers us is the sign says closed dawn till dusk till dawn. All the lights are on, all the lampposts are on, and we don't understand why you would have lampposts lit. The street lights don't make any difference. It's the lampposts that are lit, and they're all night long. And they will start playing basketball between 10:30 and 11, even though there's a 10 o'clock. We know there's a 10 o'clock city ordinance, but it goes on and on. Excuse me, I get up every morning before between 4:30 and 5 o'clock. And I can't be awake for 4 and 5 hours every night. And I know our neighbors are feeling the same way. We would really like to have something done. I know Federal Way has just passed that no lights, no park in the evening. There are gangs down there. I work for a local school district. I'm a director. I am affiliated with the gang problem in the Tukwila area. So I'm very much aware of who they are and what they're doing down there. Something really needs to be done. And I have been in contact with Chief Baker. He's been great. He has emailed me. He's had a couple of officers stop by and
He's hiding in the back room, and I just talked with him.
Oh, okay. Anyway, he's been great to talk to. His officers have been very pleasant. We see officers there at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. We don't see them at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock during the week, nor on the weekends. But we do see them sitting in the parking lot down there, which is great. We're happy to have them. But when we need them is during the middle of the night. We need them just to take a perusal through there. Mm-hmm. And so we're just here this evening because it's just totally gotten out of hand. We can't get in and out of our driveway half the time because the cars are parking on Soundview Drive or 4th Place on both sides. You could not get a fire truck through there if there was an emergency many weekends. And we just want a police vehicle to please stop by, to drive through, to see what it's like when you're right down there in the heart. And I know, Miss White, you also live down there, but from where we are, we're just on the other side of the King County parking lot there, and we're direct earshot with Wooten Park.
Can I ask you one question?
Certainly.
Do you have somebody walking over there in that park, like after all this? Because I know I do, and there's all kinds of liquor bottles and all kinds of stuff in there, and I know.
We don't walk over there, but I come home from board meetings 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, and they're out there playing basketball and drinking. I mean, I see it. I see it all the time. So it's not like we're just blowing smoke.
I know.
It's an ongoing problem. Oh. We would really like to have it addressed, and I don't know what else to do. Like I said, I've contacted Chief Baker.
Well, the city manager has just stated that the chief is right back here listening to this in a room that has this broadcast.
Oh, that's great. I appreciate it. He's been great to communicate with me.
And publicly bringing this to our attention, and we'll see what we can do with a conversation with the chief.
We would appreciate that.
And actually, I can give you three things real quick. One, he is going to put more patrols going in down there in the evenings. Two, he believes turning the lights out might be a good idea, so we'll have to talk to the parks folks about doing that. And three, turn the sprinklers on a little later in the evening. It also tends to discourage people from hanging around the park. So those three things at a minimum we'll take a look at, and if there's anything else we can do.
I might add that the Park and Recreation Director is right there, too.
It's real interesting that, I mean, I did suggest to him that the lights be turned out, because without the lights, I mean, that would deter them totally. They won't go down there and play, and they won't party down there, because there's no reason to. So anything you could do to support that, we would greatly appreciate.
Right.
Thank you.
And I'd also encourage you to keep the dialogue going, too.
Well, we have, and I know 911 operator knows me by first name. I think she sees my number come up, and that lady again, do I have to talk to her again tonight? 1 and 2 in the morning quite often, so. But thank you very much.
Bob,
Yes.
I would like to hear what we resolve to do. You know, what the police chief and the city manager has decided, and the parks director has decided.
I think the city manager is addressed in part, but are you asking that the police chief address it?
I think what he's asking is, in a month, come back and...
Come back.
Come back and tell
Oh,
us.
certainly we can do that. Certainly.
In a month or sooner.
Okay. Very good.
And I'll just ask the chief to put a summary of what has happened in his monthly report, so I can then put it in my monthly report.
That'd be good, because this is not the first time we've had complaints about that down there, so thank you very much. The next speaker is M. Ann Sweet.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm M. Ann Sweet, 23438 25th Avenue South in Des Moines, and I've lived there for 12 years. I think was it you that I spoke with the other day? My issue isn't to the same degree as this one, but I wanted to request that maybe you look at the small animal zoning for Des Moines as compared to Seattle. Let's see. In particular, my interest is in keeping a small number of fowl, maximum of 3 as pets and for their eggs. I realize that Des Moines does have an existing code for keeping small animals. However, in regards to the fowl, where my interest lies is that right now the zoning requires there be a 70 or 35-foot setback from each fence line, and my property is 70 feet wide. So we used to kid about, okay, we have to make the animals like walk this line down the middle of the property. The Seattle zoning is more like 10 feet, which seems a little bit more reasonable, especially if you're limiting the number as Seattle does to like a maximum of 3 animals based on square footage. And I gave a copy of the Seattle zoning or I emailed it to you if you received it for the Seattle zoning. Sorry, I'm nervous. I do understand that small animals and fowl would need to be kept in a manner that would be inoffensive to my neighbors and also not detrimental to the neighborhood. I'm just thinking of it in terms of self-sustainability, being able to have eggs in my case, and providing food sources that are closer to home, requiring less energy to produce and transport and market and that kind of thing. Also with Seattle licensing for small animals, they require licensing for dogs, cats, potbelly pigs, and miniature goats. Fowl, as far as I could determine, were not included. And when I looked at this, I did look at the licensing requirements for Des Moines, and it's pretty complex and demanding to request licensing for small animals. So my basic request is that if you would look at the Seattle zoning and maybe see if Des Moines could come a little bit closer to what Seattle is doing with small animal zoning.
What type of small animals are we talking about here?
Well, in my case, I'm just interested in fowl, in particular like chickens or ducks, something that I could get eggs from.
What about homing pigeons?
Well, yeah, that would be fun. I'm kind of a bird nut, so I'd
What
kind
happened to
of.
the homing pigeon thing?
It's still out there. It was never resolved.
That was a huge thing. We
Oh,
haven't
really?
heard anything about
Oh. Yeah, I don't know. In particular, I'm thinking about eggs.
In particular, you're looking for fowl, like
Yeah.
egg-producing type of,
Right.
okay. All right. And you say the city manager's already been given a copy of the,
Right. I spoke with him on the phone, I think, on Monday, and then I did email him the code that I could find for, as it pertains to
okay. That
Seattle.
indicates to me that staff is looking at it then.
Well, and quite frankly, though, the other issue is this a priority that council wants us to spend time on?
I understand.
We are working on the zoning code. We're going to be hopefully bringing all that back. Parts of this, I believe, is in the zoning code, but parts are in the animal code. So it's got two pieces to it. I recommended that Ms. Wheat come down and talk with council, and because her first question was, how do I make a request of council? And if there's emails, there's letters, and there's coming up in person and asking, and that's what she's doing.
Okay.
And also, I had spoken with Jan Magnuson, the animal control, and she actually was the first one that put it into my mind. She said, well, you can always make a request to city council, so.
But have you had any discussions? I imagine you probably have with the code enforcement people.
Yeah, I have, and I did look into it. It just, like I said, the main thing was the 35 feet back from each fence line, and my property is 70 feet wide, so it makes it kind of hard to.
Okay, I understand what you're saying.
Is this something that your neighbors would support?
Actually, I had geese for a number of years, and I didn't realize till recently that I was not complying, and so I have gotten rid of the geese. I no longer have the geese. I've kept geese for 20 years, and in 20 years I've only had one complaint. Most of my neighbors, I find I always tell them to let me know if there's a problem, and I find most of them really enjoyed the geese at that time. But I realize, too, that geese are noisier, they're bigger, and...
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Right now I'm interested in the smaller fowl, the chickens or ducks.
Did I see some other hands up here, Dan?
Yeah. Do you plan to have a rooster?
No.
Talking about noise?
No, I think a rooster would be out, and I'm not necessarily, just in terms of eating eggs, I don't need them to be fertilized, so I don't really need a rooster.
Okay.
And I realize
I can
that
see
would
the
be
noise as
a noise issue.
noise and odor are usually the issues that are
Right.
major concern.
Did I see anyone else? Yes, Scott.
Yeah. The problem is when we touch a code like this, how do you write it to allow hens but not rooster? You know, and back to Tony's comment, when in terms of the things we're addressing, it would seem this isn't one of those things that's high on our priorities, and it's not the sort of thing that I think we would just go in and change lightly without having to do all the research and studies. So we can certainly put it on our list of things to consider and prioritize it when we have our study sessions to talk about priorities.
Yeah, I think what they're saying here is that thank you for bringing it to our attention, and it's now on our radar screen, where it's not likely that that's going to come before the council anytime in the very near future for a resolution until we find a time to actually address it.
Right, okay.
But thank you very much.
All right, thank you for your time, appreciate it.
The third person and final is Richard Kennedy. Good evening, Mr. Kennedy.
Good evening, Mayor Sheckler. Good evening, council members. For the record, my name is Richard Kennedy. My address is 18825 6th Avenue Southwest, Normandy Park, Washington, 98166. I come tonight bearing a gift for the city, and in that I'm not Greek, you don't have to worry about it. Tony, can you make that thing go on? Okay. A week ago, yesterday, we were all gathered at the Oddfellows Hall celebrating the 50th anniversary of the incorporation of the city of Des Moines. At the same time, in the other Washington, this United States flag was flown over the Capitol, Here we go. And so I'm going to present this to the city so that you'll have some keepsake of that day.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Well, you're welcome.
I might add, I was there, and I think a number of you were. As you know, Mr. Kennedy was a mayor for the city previously, and his performance there, I could only say, was an A+. He shared some very interesting history with the citizens that were there. I, for one, found it very enjoyable and related quite well to a number of the things that he was saying. But overall, I'd give you an A+ on that performance. That was great.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Sheckler. So I'll give these to you, and then I shall depart to spend a lovely evening.
Rub it in.
While I leave you with all your foul issues.
Now, don't you want to enjoy a little flashback to days gone by?
Boy, I had psychiatric treatment for years. Thanks all. Good
Thank
to
you,
meet
Richard. Is there anyone that did not sign up that would like to address the council at this time? Seeing none, am I recognizing a face out there that, Phil, is that you? Well, we have our lobbyist, Phil Watkins, here with us this evening. Glad to have you on board. Let's go on to board and committee reports and council member comments, again, starting with Carmen.
Okay. Lots of things going on. There are two posters that are available at the field house. One is about the 4th of July event. The other is a list of all of the upcoming sanctioned birthday events in town. And both are available for people who might want to post them at their businesses or around town on bulletin boards, wherever, at the field house. We'd love to see people come and get them and spread them out so everyone knows what's happening, when, where. The senior center is going to provide a service for some of those who might like to make it to the farmers market and are not able to have transportation. This is going to be posted on our TV channel, and it will also be available as a handout up at the senior center. But essentially, those who are 55 or older who live in Des Moines or Normandy Park, if they would like to have a shuttle from the senior center, pick them up at their home and take them down to the farmers market, they will be doing it the 2nd and 4th Saturday of July and August. You need to call the senior center by 4 p.m. of the Wednesday prior to that Saturday if you'd like to be on the shuttle and make the arrangements. The Farmers Market Board held a meeting this Monday morning early and had several things to report. The charter documents are now effective with the state of Washington as of June 4th, so the Des Moines Farmers Market has effectively been accepted as an entity by the state. Those who have been down there, and I'm being one of them, have said that 3 weeks of sales are ahead of what they accomplished last year. Both the revenues and the attendance are up. We have 5 new vendors already and more to come. One vendor made a comment this weekend that she had just had the best day she's ever had at any farmer's market that she's been at. So things are looking very good. Some very nice new items that if you haven't been there a while, you'll find more to choose from. Get a chance to talk with old friends and neighbors. It's already been touched on that we had our official 50th birthday celebration at the IOOF Hall last Wednesday, a week ago. And for those of you who didn't make it, it was a great event. Lots of cake and beverages and historical displays and collages and speakers and 50s music, and it went off very well. The museum upstairs, all of the people on the board went in there, and they got that place just looking fantastic. And the museum is now open on Saturdays from 1 o'clock till 4 o'clock. So any of you who have not had an opportunity to drop by there that would like to will find it open each Saturday this summer from 1 till 4. And this is the upstairs of the IOOF Hall on 225th, and it's just west of where Butler's Bar and Grill is, just down the hill. I think that's all I have to report. The
Thank you, Carmen.
other things are not city things.
Ed?
None of my committees have met,
Okay.
so no report.
Scott?
The Environment Committee had a meeting this evening, and we had two agenda items. One was a review of the surface water management ordinance. It's in response to an NPDES permit. We touched on that, and then we got a short briefing on Water District 4 capital improvement project. And I think it was said that the council will be briefed in August for
13th?
for that particular item. So that's my report.
Thank you, Scott. Susan?
Well, it was a very nice celebration, opening ceremony kind of thing at the Odd Fellows Hall for our 50th birthday. And it's nice to see so many people participating and enjoying that. However, I don't want to throw a wet blanket on anything. But, I am concerned about our budget. I mean, this is stuff we're going through, and we're having a retreat. Don't know if the public all knows this, but we're having a retreat on downtown planning this Saturday. I just want to make a comment about this because I've been sitting up here for 8 years. I cleaned out my stuff today. Every now and then you get in a mood to go down and find all the stuff, I have notebooks like this on economic development. This is just a tip of the iceberg that we've been working on, or we've had studies on for like 8 years. And, we've had a lot of these retreats on economic development, downtown planning. So I know Denise is working really hard, our planning manager, and I hope it's going to be productive. But, in lieu of what we're dealing with the budget right now, I'm not holding out a lot of real optimism on, downtown planning right now. I hate to sound negative, but we have to keep working at it. There's no doubt about that, but I think we've spent so much time on this, and for me personally, I'm a little frustrated we haven't seen more results. So I hope the public's going to come, share their comments. I think everybody's slightly frustrated downtown. I've talked to business people. They're not doing well. The recession, people are suffering. So yes, we have to plan, but I'm just not sure right now what we're going to accomplish out of this, but we'll see. I'll stay optimistic. But I just want everybody to know there's a lot of stuff we've been working on for a long time that hasn't been really implemented for, lots of reasons, but I think we all share that frustration.
Okay. Dan?
I know he's left, but I want to thank Richard for the thoughtfulness he showed in obtaining that flag for us on the 50th birthday. And then I just wanted to say that on the meeting on Saturday, I'll be leaving at about 11 o'clock. For the last several months, I've been training for the STP, and this weekend is our peak training weekend, and we're going to have to be out for 8 hours on the bikes on Saturday, so we'd like to ride while it's light out. Thank you.
Regarding the flag that was just given to us, I will read a certificate to you. This is to certify that the accompanying flag was flown over the United States Capitol on June 17th, 2009. At the request of Honorable Adam Smith, Member of Congress, this flag was flown for the city of Des Moines, Washington, in celebration of its 50th anniversary of its incorporation on June 17th, 2009. So I think, again, that was quite an honorable thing for him to do. All right, Tony, do we have any admin reports?
First is a copy of the video, covert video cameras use, policy that, quite frankly, the council asked me to give you several months ago, and there is one issue in it that we are going to do a little more research on, and that is exactly how long we are allowed to maintain the videos themselves, if they are not going to be used for evidence purposes right now, the bulletin that I passed out to you says 90 days. It may be less, it may be more, but we want to make sure that we get it right. And then second, I want to give you a copy of the strategic plan for enhanced school safety that the Highline School District and the police department have been working on for several months. And it's now done. And also let you know that we're working with the Highline Community College on the exact same sort of document. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Watkins.
Thank you. Nice to be here tonight. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Some of you have known me for a while. Others, we're just getting to know each other. I'm Phil Watkins, and since the first of the year, I've represented the city of Des Moines in Olympia on issues of concern to the city. And Tony asked me to be here tonight to give you a brief report, and he stressed brief, and I'll try to comply with that. And if you have any questions,
Thank you, Phil.
I'll be glad to respond. What I thought I'd do is speak very generally about the legislative session, and then a little bit more specifically about some issues that were of interest to the city. This was the long session. Every other year we have a 105-day session, and it started on January 12th and ended on April 26th. I have been around the legislature as staff or a lobbyist for 23 years, and this is the most difficult session fiscally, as the legislature dealt with the same kind of issues you all have been dealing with in your budget, what you'd like to do, what you wanted to do in addition that you found out you're not going to be able to do, and then what have you been doing that you're going to have to stop doing. And the legislature had to do that to the tune of several billions of dollars. But that was not the only thing that happened at the legislature. It never is. And during that time, the Senate managed to introduce 1,189 bills, policy and fiscal bills, and the Senate managed to, the House managed to introduce 1,387 bills, a total of 2,576 bills that were introduced during the session.
Every one of them got a hearing, right?
No. 577 ultimately became law. I identified 61 bills that would have had direct impact on Des Moines, either negative or positive, and that's what's on the list that I passed out to you. I did something on your behalf on almost all of them, in some cases merely monitoring, in some cases testifying, and in some cases extensive contact with the legislature, and especially your delegation, who were really outstanding on your behalf, and then the legislative staff as well. Of particular interest, I've highlighted in yellow some of the bills that we spent quite a bit of time on. First was a bill dealing with the rents that you all pay to the Department of Natural Resources for the leasing of aquatic lands. And for some of you who have been around the marina for a while, you know that there's been an ongoing unhappiness with the way those rates are assessed. The department's not happy, marina owners aren't happy. And there was an interest group in Tacoma that was very unhappy with their rising rates. And as a result of that, there were a couple of bills introduced, House Bill 1077 and Senate Bill 5255, which would have changed the way rents are assessed. It went through several incarnations, and it finally ended up late in session as a bill that would have put your marina in a zone with Seattle and basically all King County marinas, and then would have taken the assessed property value of those areas, and that would have been the basis for the rate you all would have paid, which obviously would have been grossly unfair to the city of Des Moines. So we had the sponsor of the bill, and he agreed that he would put the bill aside at the last minute, and we would have ongoing discussions about a better way of doing this. The Department of Natural Resources has had its initial contact with one of my colleagues who represents recreational boat owners, who were very adamantly opposed, and we'll be working through the interim on a possible legislative solution that we can all live with. Second item I'd like to talk to you about was the supplemental transportation budget. As you know, 2 years ago, or was it 1 year ago, the legislature appropriated $500,000 for repair of landslides along two of your major arterials. But the language in the bill was technically flawed, and so even though the legislature wanted to make sure that money got to you, the language in the bill didn't allow them to do that. So we worked very closely with Senator Kaiser's office and staff and got that language corrected in the supplemental transportation bill. So if that money hasn't arrived yet, it should be arriving fairly soon. The legislature has and the governor have been very interested in addressing the global warming problem and greenhouse gases, and that issue has evidenced itself in many ways in many bills that were in the legislature this year. House Bill 1490 and Senate Bill 5687 were titled greenhouse gases, but in fact the main part of the bill had to do with zoning that would have to exist around sound transit, light rail stations, and if you had a dedicated busway going through your city, what the zoning would have to be. Obviously, the first problem with that from any city perspective is that it usurped your zoning authority to control the zoning in your community. And some of it was, in my humble opinion, and I think that some others, almost irrational. One provision would have said that you had within a half-mile radius of any of these stations, and as I understand it, there's a station right on your Kent-Des Moines border, so it would have come into your city. You would have had to have rezoned that for 50 units per acre, which if you work out how many acres are in a 1 mile zone and how many units that would have been, you probably would have ended up with 5,000 people in that little area. It also required a set-aside of 25% of the units as affordable housing, which of course would have been economically difficult. And some of the environmental community in particular were adamant about the bill, and the cities were divided. Some of the major cities thought this was a good idea, some of the rest of us didn't. So it was a lengthy period of negotiations and back and forth, and the bill finally died late in session. And then last but not least is the effort by some members of the legislature and interest groups to change their crime-free housing statute, ordinance, I should say. That, again, was, well, some of you were down to talk to members of the legislature, and the chief and the mayor were down, and the bill passed out of the Senate very comfortably, but we managed to talk to the chair of the House committee where the bill was going and expressed our concerns about how this ordinance has been effective in easing crime problems here in the city. And he agreed to hold off on it for at least a year, and we'll have to have some more discussions along the way. So that's in general what happened, and I think 4 issues that were probably fairly important to you. Every 2 years the legislature publishes a telephone directory of all the members and their committee assignments and a little pictorial directory. I brought copies of that for you to use as a reference along the way. And I hope I've been brief. Are there any questions?
Questions, anyone? Phil, I want to thank you very, very much for a couple things for coming here this evening.
Sure.
And for what I consider an outstanding job.
Well, thank you.
Representing us in Olympia last year.
You're very kind. Thank you.
And I just want to add to that, Phil was absolutely available to me unless he was in a hearing or tied up in a meeting. And even if he was in a meeting, he had his cell phone on and sometimes would answer the phone and tell me he'd get back to me. He got back to me when I asked him to. He shared a lot of information. And honestly, he opened up some doors for us that we hadn't had open to us before. And without his help, I think 1 or 2 of the bills he just described that would have particularly caused us problems would have gotten all the way through. So thanks, Phil. Well done.
I might also add that Phil, this is how I know him, worked very closely with all the ACC cities in the Highline School District during that 10-year plus debacle that we had, and he was quite invaluable to us at that time.
Thank you.
Looks like that trend is continuing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
Good evening.
This time I'd like to request that the city clerk read the consent calendar.
First motion is to approve the special and the regular minutes of June 4th, 2009. Second item, findings, vouchers audited and certified by the auditing officer as required by RCW 42.24.080, and those expense reimbursement claims certified as required by RCW 42.24.090 have been recorded on a listing which has been made available to the City Council. Motion, as of this date, the Council, by unanimous vote, does approve for payment those vouchers and payroll transfers included in the above list and further described as follows. Claim checks number 119769 through 119942, and electronic fund transfers in the total amount of $505,658.66. Payroll fund transfers in the total amount of $442,418.22. Third item, motion is to move to award the agreement for construction services for the Des Moines Fieldhouse Ball Field Number 1 expansion project to Garrett Construction Company Incorporated in the amount of $247,975 plus a 20% contingency, and to further authorize the city manager to sign said contract substantially in the form as submitted. Fourth item, motion is to approve amending the contract with American Building Services for janitorial services for city-owned buildings by extending it through December 31st, 2011, and additionally to authorize the city manager to sign the contract addendum amendment substantially in the form as submitted. Fifth item, first motion is to suspend Rule 26B in order to enact draft ordinance number 09-100 on first reading. Second motion is to enact draft ordinance number 09-100, amending the crime-free fee housing by repealing DMMC 5.64.050. Sixth item, motion is to approve the agreement for design revisions, bidding, and construction for the services between the City of Des Moines and BOLA Corporation for the Beach Park Auditorium Project Administration in the amount of $33,486 for project design revisions and $50,528 for bidding and construction administration, and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement substantially in the form as submitted. Seventh item, motion is to approve supplemental agreement number 4 with Inca Engineers Incorporated in the amount of $10,241.56 for the completion of the Des Moines Creek Trail design, and authorize the city manager or his designee to sign the supplemental agreement substantially in the form as submitted. And that concludes the consent calendar, Your Honor.
Thank you. Is there an item that a council member wishes to remove? And I see Carmen.
I just have a question. It's not a removal.
Which item, please?
What?
Which item did you say?
3.
Thank you.
On our instructions, it mentioned that there are safety issues that have been repeatedly brought to the staff's attention, a potential opportunity to address the concerns of backstop netting installation. Is that in here, or is that something we need to discuss if it should be discussed?
The backstop netting is not part of this project, and the intent of the 20% request for a contingency is so that we were hoping that the bids would come in low and we would be able to install some netting on the west side of the Fieldhouse Park, because we've had constant concerns for the past, 15 years since I've been here about balls coming over the grandstand and hitting the top of the building next door and hitting cars, etc. So we were hoping if the bids came in low enough with a 20% contingency, we could do an addendum to the contract with the construction contractor and actually get the netting done during this project.
And are you at a point where you know if the numbers are going?
Yes, we are, yes. The numbers came in, our low bid, it was an excellent amount, and we're able to initiate that.
Okay, thank you.
Dan, I saw your hand.
With your approval.
Yeah, I'm going to pull item, I had it here a moment ago, item number 5.
And Scott?
Let's go ahead and pull item 3 and talk about the wording of that motion.
Okay.
And then on item 4, which is janitorial services, where we've continued to extend and extend and extend, where I think it's a reasonable thing to do after having the state performance audit come out for King County. Is, they beat up the port, they've now beat up King County. I'm curious, wonder what a performance audit finding would be about this in terms of whether they think it's the right thing to do.
Well, management practices often say that occasionally you should put certain services out to bid if you have contractors doing them. Take street sweeping, garbage collection, janitorial services in this particular case. However, my feeling is this particular vendor has been so willing to compromise with us, find ways to continue doing the job for almost essentially the same amount of money he's been doing it for years, that while it might not be the best management practice to simply extend it again for a couple more years, I honestly believe if we put it out to bid, we might not get a price as good as this.
I think we can agree with that and understand that. As I say, I'm just wondering, in the era of where it seems the performance audits are out, with some auditors trying to put notches in their belt as opposed to perhaps really what's in the public interest, whether this would be a belt notch type. Anyway, as I say, I'm in supportive of it. I'm not going to pull it.
Yep.
But
Got it.
But we probably do need to set some standards about things like this in either a policy statement or something about how often we will go to bid on these things, and set up those procedures and expectations so that when the auditors show up, we'll have followed our processes.
Understand.
Bob?
Yes,
Same topic, just a comment.
go ahead.
It's I guess, wanting to verify if this is extending the contract, but at the same price that we were paying them back in 2006. Tony, is that correct? Okay. And with them taking care of 2 additional facilities that didn't exist in 2006.
No, the additional facilities were added, plus the Underwood restroom were added to the scope of work, and there was a price adjustment to reflect that.
Okay.
But in terms of the base service, the City Hall, the police station, the other facilities that they maintain, they're continuing that work at that same cost.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess it bothers me that wages paid to people doing this kind of work in 2006 versus now have changed significantly and tend to be lower. And your comment you made that if we went out for bid, we'd probably wind up having to pay the same price. Well, we don't know unless we go out for bid. And in fact, someone could come in at a lower bid, or they may lower their bid.
It's possible, but my feeling is that, I mean, this is essentially one gentleman who comes through our buildings, 3 times a week, 4 times a week? Given how flexible he's been with us over the years, it's quite possible that he may not bid on this at all if we put it out to bid. I'm very comfortable with the price. Another couple of years, I think, is a very good idea. And I think Councilmember Thomasson's right, though. Similar to what we did with the garbage collection contract, no matter how well things are going in a couple of years, I think this one really does need to go out to bid at that time. I mean, there's also the issue of staff time to put the bid package together, get it out, evaluate it, and award it.
It always bothers me not to go out for bid for a service contract. I mean, the worst that happens is you wind up paying the same price or more, but in today's world, I think you wind up paying less. I know you person's been a good contractor.
And he was originally selected through bid process.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, but that was quite a few years ago. And things have changed. I'd like to take off a bid, but I'm just one vote.
Well, anybody can, if they wish to move or something, go right ahead.
Well, I would like to move that we...
You'd pull it from consent calendar right now. And then
No, pull it from the consent calendar.
Yeah, I've got one step here, though, that I want to go ahead with before? Are you all done making comments regarding what you're doing? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the remainder of the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please.
Let's confirm which ones got pulled.
I'm going to tell you that right now. Item number 3 by Scott and item number 5 by Dan.
And 4.
There you go. Okay. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye. Aye. Okay, let's start with Dan. We'll go with item number 5. Scott, you'll be followed, Dan, with 3, and Ed, you'll follow Scott with 4.
Okay, thank you. I had some questions for staff. Probably I saw the chief out there. This item regards an alteration in our crime-free rental housing program, and our lobbyist, Mr. Watkins, just talked about issues with that. Apparently, the Rental Housing Association was successful in getting some legislators interested in this matter. And supposedly this item is to forestall the legislature getting involved further. And I guess it seems to me that by changing this, it's just as if we're doing what the legislature wanted anyway. And so I wanted to hear from the chief about whether he thought this was a good idea to remove Section 5.64.050, grounds for denial of business license or crime-free housing endorsement. And basically, what it says here is that no endorsement shall be issued to an applicant who's been convicted or employs any management personnel who've been convicted within the previous 1 year of a misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor that relates directly to the operation of rental housing. And there's some other ones about regarding felonies and civil judgments. None of them include an absolute never. They all allow someone to do that. None of these are across the board misdemeanor, felony, or civil judgment. They're only as specifically relate to the operation of rental housing. And the argument that has been made is that if you prevent people who have served time for their crime from re-entering society in a useful fashion, that is unfair. And while I would agree with that, I don't think this prevents people who've been convicted from re-entering society by just limiting in a certain number of years and only regarding crimes that are specific to the function for which they be serving. I mean, there's plenty of examples in the law of people who commit crimes in a particular area who simply cannot get jobs in that area again, but could find jobs elsewhere. So I'd like to know your thoughts about this, and if you think it's wise to remove this, or whether you think we should leave it in. The comments apparently that we have from administration, or that administration and legal department concur with this action, but I didn't see specifically, police department. And you're the ones who have to carry this out.
And before the chief responds, I want to talk just for a moment about the politics of this particular bill. It was introduced by Senator Hargrove, I believe, and when Phil did speak with him about it, he expressed concern about this, not the language in our code, but this concept. And that was the main reason why he agreed to introduce the bill that the Rental Housing Association gave him. That bill also had language in it regarding mandatory programs versus voluntary programs. And that was the biggest concern for us, because our program is mandatory versus voluntary. And quite frankly, the way it was characterized to us in the legislature is the bill was going to go almost entirely as it had been first sponsored, with a few tweaks here and there, in order to get this particular language in, or it wasn't going to go at all. And part of what we told one particular representative is that since he was also concerned about this concept, is he said that if we strip that out of our ordinance, then he'd be willing to not have a hearing on the bill. And now, before I say anything further, I'd like the chief to talk about the substance of this and the impact not having it in our ordinance would have on the police department and crime in the city.
And thank you for this very important question. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Watkins for working with us and bringing this to our attention so that we could deal with it in a timely manner while the legislature was still in session. This section of the ordinance was put in as more of a common sense guide for owners and managers of rental housing in the community of Des Moines. We would hope that they are screening the employees that they're employing to manage properties that are rented and have access to those properties that might have master keys or might be above suspicion in entering those apartments or other dwellings with passes that would allow them to do so frequently or infrequently, with or without the tenant's approval or presence. Senator Hargrove and apparently some others had issue with this and felt that it was probably much too intrusive for the ordinance itself to put this in and list this as grounds for denial of a business license. Though I would like to see something like this in the ordinance, which would be a guide for the owners and managers of rental properties, we can turn to they're the ones that stand the civil liability for their actions, not necessarily the city. And the removal of this, while we think it has helped because we have seen the changes occur on many of the rental properties where we were having long-term issues and problems, and we have seen the changes. I feel that this may have been a guide for the owners and managers to better manage their own properties, which was the goal of the entire ordinance. And if we pull it out, it won't mean that we won't still recommend it. It just means that it won't be part of the ordinance itself. And we'll watch and see what impact the removal of this has on the crime statistics on rental properties in the city.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other cities with mandatory programs in the state of Washington?
To the best of my knowledge, no, there aren't.
And have other cities approached you, since we're the city that has a mandatory program, to ask about our program and how it's working, and shown an interest in having a similar program in their cities?
I've had several police chiefs talk to me about it, but as far as I know, none of them have enacted a mandatory program within their own cities.
And in fact, during testimony on the bill when it was in Senate, a couple of cities got up and said they thought the programs are better if they're voluntary. Now, better, in my opinion, was very subjective, because I think what they meant is they got better cooperation from those landlords who opted to participate in the program. And I talked with a few of the cities who had commented to that effect, and I asked them, well, how effective has the program been in what we really want it to do, which is to reduce crime? And they said, well, at the complexes where it's enacted and done, it seems to be doing a good job. So I thought it was very curious for them to be testifying in that manner. But, well, there you go. That's what they were saying to the legislature. And that's what got it through the Senate.
And my follow-up to that is really very simple. If voluntary programs worked in all cases, I wouldn't be here.
So is there anything to guarantee that a bill is not going to come, that if we change our ordinance, by weakening it somewhat, and I believe it's been a successful ordinance for our city from reports that you've given us, that bill will not appear next year in the legislature anyway, again, addressing the issue of mandatory versus voluntary programs, in which case why did we weaken our bill? And then an additional question would be, I know without discussing the specifics, I just today received a letter in my, confidential letter in my mailbox about an executive session meeting we're going to have next week, which pertains to rental housing. And I'm wondering if it might not be best to, use that time before we make a decision on this.
I know what you're referring to, and I just got it.
And I haven't had a chance to read it, so
I would support it.
just delaying it for a week.
I have no problem with that.
And my actual strong recommendation would be to adopt this ordinance this evening. In answer to the Mayor Pro Tem's question, would this guarantee that the bill won't resurface next session? No. There's absolutely no guarantees in the legislative process. However, if we don't adopt this ordinance, I think that guarantees it will be reintroduced next year.
It will be what?
If we do not adopt this ordinance, it guarantees that it will be reintroduced next year.
He wants to get all the facts in front of him first.
What's the hazard in waiting a week?
There is none that I know of, and I know I recently got the same information you just got. I may want to vent a little bit.
Well,
I haven't read it. Yeah, I haven't read it.
You'll vent when you read it. Anyways, I'm just saying that I would go along with that. Okay, I'll wait until he releases his. You got them?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we got Susan, then Ed, then Scott.
Well, I guess that was going to be my question, is in lieu of this coming up before us at the next meeting, right, July 2nd, would it not be better till we put all these facts together? And I guess I need a answer from you, our city attorney, Tony, because
I'm going to suggest that, Council, you're getting very dangerously close to discussing something that it absolutely must be discussed in executive session. And if that's where we're going to go, we either go in executive session now or we put this off till next week. 1 week, I agree, is not going to delay it too much. But the issue that we have to discuss from the letter that the Mayor Pro Tem talked about is very, very serious.
yeah,
And I would not go any further on that discussion tonight. And if passing this ordinance this evening feels timing-wise not the right time to do it, we do have a slot available on next week's agenda since it is a study session. We can put it on there. And if after our executive session discussion, council wants to go ahead and adopt the ordinance, then we can do so.
I would certainly think that's probably
So,
appropriate.
Your Honor, a motion to forward this to next
I've already
meeting.
discussed this with Mayor Pro Tem, Sherman, and let everybody have their say, and then we'll come back. Okay? So, Ed, you are next.
Well, after all the discussion, I guess I would just like to move that we move this to our next meeting.
I would second that.
All right. Then a motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
You opposed?
And Scott never did get an opportunity to speak. There is a discussion on that, Scott, if you wanted to.
Well,
It's after the fact, but I still want to hear from you.
the issues are related, but they're not dependent on each other.
Have you read them?
I scanned the
Okay.
correspondence. The issue is the legislature and the lobbyists for the other sides trying to get legislators to do what they want versus our lobbyists trying to get legislators to do what we want. The way I understood the lobbying effort was that legislators didn't like the clause of our ordinance about the employment of persons who had been convicted. and may not have cared a hoot about the rental program. And to save the rental program, to give up a part of it, but to save all of the good parts, okay, we lose 10%, we keep 90 versus lose the whole thing, was essentially what I believe the conversation with the lobbyists were, and almost my impression is a promise that we'd take care of this. So regardless of the other issue, which we're not talking about, it would seem to me that we need to act on this and should act on this, or next year we'll lose the whole thing.
And
because
I think you're right, and we will act on it.
Yeah. But I think our acting on it has nothing to do with the rest. I mean, we need to deal with this,
It may.
Unless we were to get rid of the whole thing, but, we can get rid of one part tonight and the rest whenever, if that was whatever we decided to do. But, so I'm perfectly content with taking action on this tonight as it was proposed, because it's essentially what our representatives negotiated with several legislatures as an appropriate course of action, which saved the program this year.
Thank you, Scott. And Carmen, I'm going to have to cut you off because I did this as a courtesy to Scott because the action's already been taken. So there is really not a discussion here, but I did notice that we kind of moved it quickly, and Scott may have missed his opportunity for the discussion. But the action has been taken. It will be on the agenda for next week. And in the meantime, we will have an executive session to look at the other issue. Okay? All right. Let's see. Ed, I believe you were...
Yeah.
Actually,
you were next.
Yeah, item
Go ahead.
3, I think, but I don't care, whichever.
No. Okay, you were next. Go ahead.
Okay, so I pulled this one because I didn't like the context of the scope creep being put in contingency. So, I've played a few ball games at that field, and during the warm-up practice, I saw the softball get thrown and go through the apartment window. So I know it's a real problem, and certainly some of the balls went over the fence, and who knows what they hit at the time. So I understand it's a real issue, and we may now have money available to expand the scope of the project, but we should do that intentionally through the motion as opposed to just saying you have more contingency money, and so let's do our normal 10% contingency and authorize the city manager to execute a change order for the fence in amount not to exceed or something, so that we don't authorize a contingency, not get a fence, but get something else that we didn't know about. So
Gold-plated home plate, for example?
Yeah, or a new city manager's car or something, whatever it might be, but...
Me, I want the green car.
So I'm not opposed to the concept. I just think
What's the value of that additional?
Well, we only have had one bid, and one cost estimate, and it was $45,000. But that was not,
That was as a standalone project.
That was, and it was 2 years ago, so.
Okay, now you're talking, that scares me, because I know of a city that's gotten written up by that same auditor for change order practices that were well beyond the scope and shouldn't have been change orders.
What city?
We had, actually what happened, I had hoped that we would have the netting as part of this project. We just weren't able to get the design put together in time. Otherwise, we would have added it as an alternate for this project. But if we could add to it in an amount not to exceed $50,000, I think that would cover.
Yeah, I couldn't support that because I know we shouldn't negotiate change orders for $50,000 worth of work that weren't in the original bid, that weren't part. I mean, does our attorney have any recommendation about that?
Maybe.
I would concur with
I understand the
Councilmember Thomasson's
contingency fee
concerns.
is over $45,000.
Yeah. So where it may be appropriate for the Parks Department to say, we have money that we didn't plan on, would like to add a fence, to do it through a change order probably isn't appropriate.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
So I would recommend we change that 20 to 10% just to handle issues having to do with this project as it's outlined. And with additional funding that is available in the project itself, we'll go back to our design folks and see if we can't put together a separate bid for additional netting and fencing.
That will work too.
Okay, so when the original motion was read, the blanks were filled in with dollar amounts, is that correct?
Yeah, and it's from the bid tabulation sheet we
Do
gave.
you like those figures again?
Well, there again, I'd prefer that, well, let me try. I move to award the agreement for construction services for the Moines Field House Ball Field Number 1 Expansion Project 2. I'm assuming it's Garrett Construction.
Correct.
And here again, what schedules and alternates are we including?
All of them.
Okay, so the motion would include Schedule A, Schedule B, Alternative 1, and Alternative 2.
Correct.
For a total project cost of $247,975, including sales tax, plus a 10% contingency, and to further authorize the city manager said subcontract substantially in the form as submitted.
Okay. That motion has been made and seconded. Dan, I saw you.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I don't know. I think that the netting, as, you know, that most of the work being done here is related to safety features. And the netting as a safety feature, to me, bears a relationship to the rest of the project. My question to staff is, if you were to go out to bid this, could it be done in enough time that the Garrett Construction would have a chance to bid on it before, and other companies have a chance to bid on it before they complete their project? So while they're at the scene, if they turn out to have the lowest bid, I mean, that may be part of how they bid it even, saying, well, if it can be done while we're doing this, then we can do it for X amount of dollars. Is it possible to get it done in timely fashion?
It needs to be designed.
Correct.
And once
It has to be engineered.
It has to be engineered. Once that's done, one alternative would be to go to the company that's providing it, and as an add-on to the project. Correct me if I'm wrong, Val. She's shaking her head. I guess can't do that.
If it's referenced in the bid specs, it can be an add-on. If it's not, it's just.
Was it referenced in the bid specs?
No, it was not.
Then the way you're describing it, Mayor Pro Tem, cannot be done.
This may wind up being more costly.
We could invite bids.
Separately.
Yeah.
But we have to have an engineered project for them to bid on.
Time frame that if you acted on it quickly.
Yes.
We might be able to get it done
Yeah, that might be
while
the
they're
way
on
to do
site.
it. If council authorizes the use of these funds for that purpose, the use of the additional, the available funds within this project, you authorize that we can go ahead
Well,
and.
they'll authorize it when the contract is brought to them for approval. The direction I'm hearing from council is go get a bid price for us to consider
Okay.
on that particular,
And I'd like it to be done quickly so that it might be done a little less expensively.
that makes sense.
All right. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, unanimous. Ed, your next item 4, please.
Yes, what I'd like to do is make the following motion to have the janitorial services in city buildings be put out for bid. I would like to move to have the janitorial services contract for city buildings to be put out for bid.
And I'll second that.
Motion been seconded. Discussion? Anyone? Scott?
As I said when I questioned the practice, that I do think it's likely good value, and we have been receiving good service, so I would support the original motion on the consent calendar, which is an extension of this agreement for an additional 2 years, was it?
Yes.
So I wouldn't be supportive of the motion to go out to bid at this point.
Yes, Carmen?
I agree with what Scott said, and I also feel that our staff is so lean and so busy that it would be a real chore for them to fit in the whole process of redoing it now. And I don't see a necessity. I don't see any red flag that says it has to be done now. So I don't mind Ed's thoughts that we would bid it next time around, but I don't think this is the time to do it.
Ed?
My concern is very simple. We know that labor costs have gone down. We know that contractors are charging less for the same service. This contract, as proposed, is for the same rate that we've been paying since 2006. Sorry.
But the 2009 values of houses have dropped back to the 2006 values. If you correlate that with this, we're still at 2006.
I'm not talking about the value of houses. I'm talking about labor.
I know, but this number does not represent a 2009 bid. It represents what would have been bid back in 2006.
Right. The person with their hand up is Scott.
Okay.
Scott.
It was a small sentence in the document, but this contractor is required to pay prevailing wages, and the state says what those wages are. So they can't bid $5 an hour if the state says they have to pay $20. So in prevailing wages are an odd mystery of the state that they basically look at union agreements to say,
You said that very nicely, thank you.
you know, this is the dollar amount, because that's what the normal union contracts are, and it's prevailing wages is what the union or our lobbyist left, is what the union lobbyist got the state to do in support of the unions so that people couldn't underbid unions. They had to pay them the same whether they were unioned or not. So unless the state has changed the prevailing wage rates, there's no changing the dollar amount.
And actually, there is an exception to the prevailing wage requirement
Unless
if
it's
the
the
owner
owner
of the company is providing the service. In this particular case, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the owner of the company, isn't it? It's not? Oh, okay, so we do have prevailing wage being provided.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Okay, I'll be voting in favor of it too, although I do want to go on a record as saying I understand where Ed's coming from. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, would you please raise your hand?
The motion is to
Who's
put it
that?
out to bid.
Ed's motion or the...
Yeah.
The motion is to put it out to bid.
Oh, no, that was my error. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I am not going to be in favor of that motion, but with the understanding that I do understand where he's coming from. So all those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Those that are opposed?
Aye.
Okay, is there another motion that a council member wishes
I'll
to
go
make?
ahead and move the motion that was on consent calendar for this item.
Any second?
Second.
Motion made second. Any discussion? Dan?
Well, the city manager can tell you that there have been occasions where I've complained that there's not been soap in the soap dispensers in the men's room, which is one of the jobs that they have.
Yes.
And I believe also times when there hasn't been paper, in the paper dispenser. And you've helped out, Tony. It's not, I don't think it's in your job description, but it was a public health issue.
That is other duties. However, to the defense of our contractor, he does not come in Thursdays because we have council meetings. So if we have a busy Thursday in the court, in particular, it's not unusual, but not very often that we run out of soap or paper towels in the men's room that you're referring to.
Although I think he may have heard what you just said. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand and say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay. At this time, council, please take your 10-minute break, followed by a 10-minute executive session to discuss potential litigation in which the city may become a part. I'm going to begin with a motion. I'll move to authorize settlement in the amount not to exceed $500 in full settlement of Mr. Pierce's claim regarding the public records request from the Des Moines Police Department.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye. Aye. That is unanimous. Thank you.
Here you are.
Next item is a public hearing, draft resolution, 6-year transportation improvement. Who is our lead speaker here? Go ahead. Well, actually,
That'll be Mr. Brewer. And also, I just looked and nobody signed up to speak, Your Honor.
yeah, that was going to be my next question. Is there anybody? Okay. Okay. In that case, I'll go ahead and ask staff to make their presentation at this time.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Dan Brewer, City Transportation Engineer. I'm here tonight to present the 6-year TIP, which is our Transportation Improvement Plan. Just to briefly summarize, state law requires that each city adopts a 6-year transportation improvement plan. We send our transportation improvement plan to the Washington State Department of Transportation and the Puget Sound Regional Council and other agencies for planning coordination purposes. Projects must be on our TIP to be eligible for most grant opportunities. It's important to remember that there's a lot of important projects that the city has in its long-range planning that are not included on the TIP. More of the comprehensive list is included in our comprehensive transportation plan. The intent of the TIP is that all of the projects on that list would be constructed within the next 6 years if the funds identified became available. So as you'll see at the end of my presentation, without a massive influx of funds, very few of the projects in this TIP would be constructed within the next 6 years. So in summary, the TIP that was in the council packet is essentially the same TIP that was adopted last year. There's been no new projects added, no projects were removed or completed. We adjusted a couple of the priorities, and project cost estimates and schedules were updated. And I believe this is attachment 2 in the council packet, which represents the changes in the project priorities. Lists the priority that was in the approved TIP from last year and what's proposed for this year. Costs were updated to reflect current bidding, current bid tabs, and planning level cost estimates. So we took a lot of information from our comprehensive transportation plan update and kind of used that to make sure that our project costs were reflecting in both plans evenly. And the schedules were updated based on funding opportunities and our obligations on the grant funding we already have. So one of the things I wanted to talk about with you is the size of our TIP. Right now there's 39 projects on this list, and the total for these 39 projects is just under $145 million. So 6 years. For 6 years. So to draw some comparisons,
the comprehensive transportation plan that was adopted just a few weeks ago has about 60 projects identified, and the total for our 20-year long-range plan is $200 million. So what that is saying is that this 6-year TIP is representing about 75% of the cost expenditures that we are planning on for 20 years. Another comparison is the adopted arterial street CIP for this year, which looks at a 6-year kind of horizon. Those expenditures are about $50 million, which includes all of the grants that we might receive and traffic impact fees and things like that. So the 6-year TIP is 3 times the size of our fiscally constrained capital improvement plan. So it's my opinion that the TIP is a little bit, there's too many projects on this TIP. It feels more like a 15 to 18 year kind of a document. And my suggestion would be that we have some discussion tonight about, reducing some of the projects off of the list, possibly the last 13 projects off the list. If those were removed, it would scale the TIP back by about $40 million, would bring us in at about $100 million 6-year TIP. While that may not go quite far enough, that kind of represents half of what's in our 20-year plan. So it kind of becomes more of a 10 to 12-year plan. So right now we've got 3 basic planning tools for transportation projects. The 20-year comprehensive transportation plan, our 6-year TIP, and what ultimately gets adopted tonight, we use when we go through our capital budget and we select project for funding in our CIP. So that concludes my presentation. And
okay. All right. First off, is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak? Second call. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak? And the third and final call. Is there anyone that wishes to speak? Okay. At this time, I will inquire if there's any council member to have any questions to ask the administration at this time. I did see your hand up first. Then I saw Carmen. Then Scott.
Okay. I've got a question on this improvement program sheet, attachment 1. Okay, so, okay, I understand. MPO, RTPO, what does that mean? And it says PSRC on this attachment 1.
The MPO is a Metropolitan Planning Organization. I think that it's the regional, PSRC is our regional.
Oh, I know that. But what does the RTPO mean?
Regional Transportation Planning Organization.
Okay, so does this go to?
We report this to Puget Sound Regional Council.
Okay, so my next point, and I want to ask you this, is we're impacted by getting funding for these projects. Are we impacted by not being a member of PSRC for like transportation dollars recently that were just perhaps doled out that we didn't get a penny of? And I'm asking, and honestly, I want an answer.
I wouldn't know. I don't know the answer to that.
You wouldn't have a feeling about it?
I would.
I'd like somebody's opinion about that.
From a technical standpoint, the way this is supposed to work is PSRC has a set of criteria they use to rate and evaluate all the projects that come in. And I would trust that the technical staff is doing their job properly, and it's very rare that the full board of PSRC doesn't take the technical staff's recommendations and adopt them. What you're asking is a political question, and as much as I would like to say no politics is played at this level, I think it's arguable that it is to a point. How much it has been to our detriment, I don't know. When I looked at the projects that did get stimulus money, it was obvious to me that our projects weren't in the same ballpark. They just weren't. They weren't in the same league. And I don't have too much discomfort with the way the stimulus money was doled out and the fact that we didn't get any when I look at those projects. But when you start looking at larger pots of money, the annual ongoing thing, arguably, yes, not being a member could be to our detriment, but it's not supposed to be.
Right, I understand that, but I just want to make, I guess a statement or a feeling I have that, as we are going to have to strive for funding for these projects to get them done, these are thoughts we need to consider as a council, whether it really is to our detriment that we aren't at the table in some of these discussions. And I've said this before, and on the record, I'm going to say it again. I think it's wrong that we're not a member of that organization.
Okay. Carmen, you're next.
Okay. I guess my first thought is that I would want to know which of these are the most critical for safety or those kinds of reasons, or which of them are most likely to have funding available from whatever sources, and whether or not you would say it differently or have put together any kind of a list of how we might prioritize and get rid of some of them. Is that anything you've prepared for us or have thoughts about that you could share?
Yeah. On this attachment 1, the first page, if you look on the far left, these are ranked in priority order.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah.
But
so the most, financially for the city, the most important project, in my opinion, is the pavement management program because of the expense of the maintenance of that. The second project, our Des Moines Creek Trail, is put at priority number 2 because of the funding obligations. We've received some grant money for that, and we've got to spend that or we're going to lose that money. So that's priority number 2. You'll notice as far as safety and repairs, the third is the North Twin Bridge seismic and footing repair work. So that I would say that like the top 10 projects are like the premier projects for the city.
Okay, so you've already organized them either by repair, safety, or funding?
Yeah.
And with the Transportation Committee.
What?
And with the Transportation, Public Safety and Transportation Committee.
Ah.
We've gone through this.
Okay. Number 3 and number 5 both looked like safety issues. Number 4, do we have funding to buy the property that needs to be bought if that one's to be carried out? Do we have a source for that?
Yes, we have the funding to move forward with right-of-way negotiations, and I believe we're going to do that very soon. This is ranked at number 4 again because we do have some grant funding that requires us to have this project built or significantly underway by May of 2010, or we lose $500,000 in that particular funding. So,
your instructions to us say that we have to have this adopted by July 1st, so we really have to reach a conclusion tonight. And it sounds like you've already organized it, so we just chop it off at whichever number is the right one.
If you agree with these priorities, yeah. So.
Okay.
And changing a priority, let's say it is pulling them at random, taking priority 6 and flip-flopping it with priority 8, for example, which I've seen councils in the past do. Well, the committee did a few of those flip-flops, but for the most part, whether you're number 6, 7, or 8, it's not going to have that much impact on your ability to get funding and be eligible for some of the grant programs we'd like. But if you're changing something from, say, number 22 up to number 5, yes, that is a significant jump. We do reorder these a little bit, and over the years what tends to happen is as we get more opportunities and we get the project further along and we've spent some money, and it looks like we can actually get that last piece that we need to do the project, then the priority really starts to shoot up to the top of the list. And that's why, for example, the North Twin Bridge and the South 216th projects are rated number 3 and 4. They're getting right up there, ready to go.
I don't have any more questions. It just seems like this is already laid out with the most urgent ones or the most fundable ones already prioritized for us. So unless somebody wants to reprioritize something.
But that is, of course, always an option of the council to do. Scott?
I did have a few questions on some of the descriptions, and item 8 is 216th Street, 24th to 19th, and the description is widen to provide center turn lane. This is the section of 216th that sits directly in front of the business park, mostly. And we've had our discussion about 5 lanes, probably, especially if it goes retail, with having to do additional SEPA work to make it 5 lanes in some plan somewhere. So my question is, do we want the description to have some language in it up to 5 lanes or something so that we don't have to readopt this when we do a little bit more definitive work? So I'm not saying we changed it, but I'm saying I think the description needs to be a little, more like what we think it might be now based on what we know. And I know this has been the same description probably, so that might be a change that would be appropriate. And I know we're in questions, so I'll just ask these as questions, and then we can get to them when we take action. But that would be one I'd question about. And the same on item 10, which is another piece of the 216th, this one being city limits to 24th. Now this one says to provide additional turn lanes. It doesn't say anything about additional through lanes. Maybe it could just say additional lanes, and then we'll get, So there's another one that we might want to change the description so that we don't run afoul if we were to ask for money. And then the same on item 13, which is the other piece. Well, no, 13 is 16th Avenue South. And some of you know this is a project I don't like. So we could cut off at item 12. No. And I would be better with this one if it was written like the one for 200th Street, or item 12 talks about Des Moines Memorial Drive joint project with SeaTac. If this said joint project with Federal Way, I have no inclination to build a street that goes through Federal Way. I don't mind improving our part of 16th, but I know the project is defined, takes the street through Federal Way. And to me, that's a Federal Way project, not a Des Moines project. But, to the extent that it's a joint project, it should probably hint that.
Yeah.
Then as you get way down on the list, if you compare item 30 to 31, 31 talks about reconstructing the street, including bike lanes, curb gutter, and sidewalks, but item 30 just says widen to provide center turn lane. It should probably have the same curb gutter sidewalk type thing if we're looking forward. Item 32 is widening 16th, and I'm just wondering whether we should say except for the bridges, because the bridges are already other projects. But so as I say, it's getting down to the section that we don't.
But if you chop projects 27 down, we have to worry about the ones you just described.
Well,
yeah.
Now that gets more into the policy debate than questions. So let me see if I can ask that in a question sort of way. I vaguely remember there was a project I would say not too long ago, but who knows how long, some sort of project on 8th Avenue where we were asking for $50,000 for sidewalk or some sort of safety improvement.
Yes.
That, was an obscure funding that came out of nowhere that if that project weren't on our list, we wouldn't have been eligible to get the money or something.
Safe route to
school.
Yeah.
sidewalk project
So-
on North Hill.
So the fact that we've got 150, whatever the number was, doesn't bother me at all, because there may be an obscure grant funding project that comes out of nowhere that's exactly item 33 in the list, and then we go after it. So to have more on the list that we, keeps us opportunities for if that obscure project shows up. And it doesn't hurt to have more on the list, because it isn't the list that we, when it comes to figuring out what money we have to spend, isn't that what the CIP is about? So, and the state encourages us to make us have this list as long as we want, as I understand the process. Is that true or not true?
Well, I'd like Dan to comment on that.
One of the problems that we typically encounter is the confusion between our CIP and the TIP in what's our locally adopted plan and what potential developers get credit for impact fees. As we they look at our 6-year TIP, a developer, for example, without naming, they'll look at the TIP and say, oh, there's a project on your TIP. You used that project to generate your traffic impact fee, so I'm just going to pay an impact fee and I'm going to go develop. What GMA requires is that in order for a development to pay an impact fee and go build their development, we have to build the infrastructure concurrent with the development, i.e. within 6 years. So if a project is number 39 or 38 or 30 on the list, but yet we have no way to get to it within 6 years or 10 years or 12 years, it creates an argument and an area for debate with applicants and their counsel about what's in our adopted plan.
Okay. So let me explore some things. This form is strictly a state exercise that we wouldn't do at all if the state didn't require that we fill out their form. So I don't have any problem filling out a form to meet the state rules and knowing that if it's not on the form, you can't ask for grants. Mm-hmm. So for GMA purposes and impact fee analysis and things of that nature, it seems to me our adopted CIP is the transportation improvement plan that we're really looking to for that document, and we just need to make it clear this is the Christmas wish list and the other is the informed document.
That's what I argue. That's my position as well.
But so that you don't have to argue that, we should help enact language in documents that you don't have to make that argument, but that they clearly say that.
I would agree with that.
Okay. So I don't know whether it's in adopting this that we make that statement or in adopting the other thing that we make that statement.
When I bring back some regulations for level service standards and concurrency standards and impact fees, that might be an appropriate place to do that.
Okay.
So in getting back to your earlier questions, I agree with you about the description for Project 8 and 10, and we should modify those to talk about what you'll hear next on the cross sections. And on the Project 13, you are correct in that we can further expand that this would be a joint project with the City of Federal Way and even potentially Metro, because and the City of Kent. The City of Kent has an interest in this particular project because it could relieve level service issues at the intersection of 272nd and Pack Highway. So it's a partnership project that without Federal Way will not happen. Okay. So we can add that.
I just don't like it looking like it's solely our project. So those were my questions.
Dan?
Yeah. Dan, maybe I should have asked this when we did our comprehensive transportation plan, that it applies to this as well. And there's some statements alluded to in the next item that we're going to be talking about with the Gateway project, that CTAC had some concerns about costs to them on military and Pack Highway that might relate to projects that we're doing in that general area. So with the Waterview Crossing project, which we're going to be looking at this year, as the start of it anyway, are there any projects in here that include improvements toward that project? For example, that we would have requested impact fees. I understand that we've done some forgiveness, but those would be applied to. Are there projects here? I realize a lot of the project may have been related to the Pacific Highway project that we already completed, but is there anything in here? And the Gateway project would be the one that I could look at most carefully, or is the Gateway project just to deal with improvements to the port property?
The Gateway project would improvements, which you'll hear about in more detail in a few minutes, would provide capacity not only for the Waterview crossing, but all of the potential development or redevelopment activities that might occur in that area of our community. Any of the impact fees that would have come in from the Waterview crossing development or any other development in Pacific Ridge, there is a formula or structure for where those impact fee monies go. And it's a little bit complicated, but primarily we have two impact fee zones currently in the city. We have a citywide zone and then our Pacific Ridge zone. And that development being solely located within Pacific Ridge, the vast majority of impact fee monies collected in Pacific Ridge are dedicated to projects specifically in the Pacific Ridge zone.
For internal streets?
Internal streets. There are some...
those wouldn't even be on here.
There are some... it's not a one-for-one. I mean, there's some credits given against the citywide impact fee and how it's calculated. And I believe that... is it residential or
I know what you're getting at. I don't remember the answer to the question. Yeah. I think, though, what the Mayor Pro Tem is asking is the projects that were included in the creation of the Pacific Ridge Transportation Impact Fee, are any of those in the tip here? Right. Or are they some of their own standalone little projects that are only in that ordinance?
I could see the Gateway. To me, a logical thing would be the Gateway, not the full Gateway project, because it wouldn't, I don't think, include right. 24th, but maybe the Gateway project portion from, 24th to the I-5.
But don't forget Pacific Ridge included the area where the Safeway is, where Fernie's is, where Ono's is. So
Yeah.
some parts of 24th and 216th
Would be more.
would be included in the Pacific Ridge TIF.
As well as, I say, the Pack Highway improvements we already did.
Right.
Yes.
There were some that are internal to the area that's Pack Highway to I-5 to 16th down to Kent Des Moines Road. And those are not in.
That is correct. So if, when a development occurs in that area and they pay impact fees, it's going to go into our impact fee fund for Pacific Ridge. And at that point, we'd be able to allocate those funds to specific targets in that zone or projects in that zone. So,
Which would include 216th and 24th that are part of the Pacific Ridge area.
I'd have to look at that.
Okay.
Because I don't know if those projects were included in the Pacific Ridge zone or the citywide zone.
Okay.
Okay. I'd be interested in that information. Thank you.
Is that it, Dan?
Yeah, thank you.
Carmen?
When I look at, and Scott made me think of this, items 8, 9, and 10 here, and then I look at our next agenda item, the Gateway Project, and we talk about offsets and alternative twos, it sounds like there's sort of a feeling that they might get redesigned a bit. And I was wondering if what it says in here is in conflict at all with what's being recommended in the next thing about those sections of road.
Other than what Councilmember Thomasson brought up in refining the description to talk about 5-lane sections and adding lanes.
And offsets to the north or west.
I don't know if I would go into that level of detail in this description. That's more of a
I think what Councilmember Scott is asking is, we don't necessarily have to have that language in there, but is there a big cost difference between having a nice straight road with additional right-of-way on both sides taken equally, or is it going to cost more to have it offset and move around because we take all the right-of-way from the north side for part of it and then equal on both sides for other parts of it?
No, what I'm thinking about is...
I'm usually right by that. I usually interpret...
Are we setting ourselves up with some descriptions here that may not turn out to be the configuration that the other one, the next one is actually recommending, and...
I don't believe so. I think what the next one talks about is a 5-lane configuration. The question... And these are going to be changed to say 5-lane configuration.
Okay, because these do not say the numbers of lanes that the next...
But that's what Councilmember Thomasson was saying, and Dan agreed that those had to be updated a little bit.
Okay. Okay.
So I think we'd be good by updating that a little bit.
Yes.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, if there are no other questions from the council to administration, I will close the public hearing. Okay. Public hearing is now closed. Is there a council member that wishes at this time to make a motion? Dan?
I move to approve draft resolution number 09-074, adopting the 2010 to 2015 6-year transportation improvement program for the city of Des Moines.
Second.
All right, I recognize Dan as the maker and Susan as the seconder. Is there any further discussion? Carmen?
I thought it was strongly recommended to us that we eliminate part of it, that there was too much there.
Well, that was a recommendation from our transportation engineer. I thought I heard Councilmember Thomasson say he might not necessarily agree with that and wanted to keep it as is.
I would agree with him on that.
I understand where Dan's coming from, but I don't think it does any harm for us to have this in our plan. It just makes his burden of arguing with the developers a little bit more difficult at times, and not in an overwhelming way that he would lose.
Scott?
To the issue that came up during my questions about Wydan are recommending that we make those shorter, it does seem that the resolution itself could be improved to clarify what this is and what this is not, and not strictly rely on the next action that will come forward.
Is there one that you would recommend?
Well, having only learned about that a minute and a half ago, I'm not quite there. But if we look at those sections, we might be able to quickly discern whether that was the case or not.
I'd caution against kind of out of sight, out of mind.
Well, yeah,
You know?
so, if a sentence were added that, the primary purpose for this is to get in line for grant funding and essentially the reasons that all the things are on the list, and that it is not the transportation plan that's considered for impact fee setting. Just a sentence or along those lines may be the first place to start dealing with the issue that staff brought up.
Listen.
I suspect we're going to get a recommendation in a minute.
Mr. Brewer, do you have any recommendations?
Do we want to maybe go ahead and have the presentation on the next item and come back to this after?
Sure.
Because that's the only that would be the only thing I might, assuming that the changes that we talked about to the attachments are incorporated.
Okay, if it's yes, Ed.
Before we go on, this is by definition a 6-year transportation plan. And as pointed out in that last item on there, projects 27 through 39, are not going to happen in 6 years, no matter how much money we have. So I wonder if it would be wise to remove them from this list and focus on the 6-year items. Those are
And remember, we do this every year, so you can add those projects back next year.
you can add them back as necessary, yeah.
If that's the will of the council, fine. I do know where Scott's coming from here, and you may have just heard me say out of sight, out of mind. I see some projects there that I have definitely been pushing for a long time. I don't want them dropped off the radar screen in any way, shape, or form.
Well,
even though they don't fit into that 6 years, because I don't know if I'm going to be around to remind people about them.
Well, but
I hear you, Ed.
We're wasting paper and time even looking at them
And
in a 6-year plan. If you want to come up with a 20-year plan, fine, but not in a 6-year plan.
I know, but it's probably my paranoia speaking.
Well, I like to move that we remove them.
So, I'm sorry, what?
I'd like to move that we remove them.
Well, there's a motion on the floor.
It's an amending motion.
Okay, independent, okay. All right, well, we're still in the discussion phase right now anyway, so is there anybody else who made an amendment?
No, you're in the decision phase.
All right, you're amending it. Is that what you're doing, Ed?
I'm making an amendment to the motion.
Amending that the motion be amended by deleting those.
By deleting them.
Yes.
Taking that portion in there. All right, is there someone that wants to second that?
From 27 to 39.
I'll second it.
You both, okay. All right, any discussion on that? Because I'm assuming that the maker and seconder are not going to accept that as a friendly amendment.
We're the makers.
No, I don't consider that a friendly amendment.
Okay.
You do not?
All right, then we'll go into discussion on the amendment. So, any discussion on the amendment? Carmen?
Is there a reason why this has to be a 6-year plan? Can it not be an 8-year or a 10-year?
No, statutory.
It has to be 6?
6-year plan.
then if we leave them all on there, they've all got dates that say that they're going to be started within 6 years, and that's not what's going to happen. Phase start is on every one of them.
You can discover gold in Des Moines.
Another fantasy.
I truly understand what you're saying, and realistically, that is correct. I just see a couple projects there I just don't want to see fall by the wayside and never come back.
Well, you know, when it comes back next year, you can keep this list and see if they're back on there again. You know, for the add
Theoretically, that's correct. Okay, any more discussion on the amendment? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, let's get back to the main motion. Further discussion on the main motion?
Dan?
Do you need more time, Dan? What I could, at the council's desire, I can hold off continuation of this to after the next item if you wish, if you think we can get through it.
Oh, that's right.
Is it the council's wish to do that?
I'd like to get back to this at no later than 10:25.
Hopefully before. Scott?
Here's maybe a suggestion.
I'll take any right now.
We have a definitive deadline by the state that this needs to be done by July 1st.
Yeah.
Maybe a way to deal with it is enact it in its current form tonight.
Amend it later.
And then amend the resolution later.
I would find that acceptable.
Yes.
For me.
Yes.
And that way, the state will get it when they get it. We can add the language that helps support the issue of staff at a later date.
I would support that.
Generally, we're pretty good at handling the curveballs, but tonight, no.
Yeah.
So we can go ahead and vote on it.
Let's vote on it then.
Go ahead.
So there probably isn't any more, we're not waiting for anything now.
Right. So we can just, any more discussion then on the main motion?
Is there any promise that it won't get lost in the shuffle later?
Don't look at me for that answer.
No, she's looking at me for that answer. We will add it to futures for the August 13th meeting, just to make sure that we are keeping it from falling through the cracks. And I see the city clerk doing that right now.
Okay.
And clearly no later than when the impact fee package comes before.
Yeah, well, and we're going to be doing that right.
Tomorrow with Tony, I sign off on futures. So you know I've heard it.
And before you vote, the understanding is the clarification on the projects that Councilmember Thomasson talked about will be incorporated into the document.
Everybody clear on that?
Yep.
And that was intended in my motion.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the main motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Thank you. I feel a little bit better. I agree, Dan. I agree. All right. Let me read that into the record, please. Okay, draft resolution 09-074, the resolution of the City Council of the City of Des Moines, Washington, adopting the 6-year transportation improvement program for the City of Des Moines for the year 2010 through 2015. Final item of business for this evening is Transportation Gateway Alternatives and Recommendations.
I'd like to call Lynn Madsen up to the podium to make the presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to give you a briefing on the Transportation Gateway project. I'm joined by Nelson Davis with KBG, our design engineer on the project. And this follows the last briefing we had of the council back in April 23rd when we gave you an overview of the scope of the project and talked about the first round of public involvement that we had in terms of the open house we had on the project, as well as the motion that the council had provided to get us to work with the City of SeaTac and the Port of Seattle to coordinate this project with them. So there will be a follow-up item as we go through this to talk about that, specifically the City of SeaTac, towards the end of the presentation. At this point, our main goals of this briefing is give you an update on the schedule and the public involvement to date on the project, and then request some direction from the council on a preferred alignment alternative. In fact, we do have a recommendation here that we've written up today. And I think you have a copy of the show. Did that get handed out? Oh, I'm sorry.
And I'd like to
Motion.
I'd like to ask the staff what action you're requiring from the council by the end of this presentation.
I think there's two things. We want some comment and direction on the alignment issue, and then we would like to talk briefly about having the mayor sign a letter on the city's behalf in regards to the comment that we heard at the CTAC committee meeting, City CTAC Council committee meeting regarding a potential alignment for light rail down 24th, which was quite a surprise to us. And we want to make sure that Sound Transit is aware that that's going on if they're not. And if they are actually talking to CTAC about it, we want to be included in that conversation.
Mm-hmm. That draft letter, Bob, was excellent.
So I'm going to suggest that Len go ahead and make his presentation, then we can get to that letter. And we do have an updated version of that based upon comments we got from council members.
Okay, thank you.
Just in terms of the project schedule, we are on target and are within budget in terms of the design work that's underway to date. Our goal is to come up with preliminary design, complete preliminary design by this fall. And we did have a briefing of the planning, the Public Safety and Transportation Committee on the 11th of this month, where we reviewed the alternatives we're about to hear today, and I think did get kind of a clear indication from the committee that we might be leaning in the particular direction of the offset alternative, and we'll describe what that is as we...
I believe that was unanimous. Yeah. Were you there that day?
Yeah, it was. Yes,
yeah.
It was.
And at the end of the presentation, you'll see a recommendation that really is what we would expect to bring back as a motion. So if the entire council is inclined to move in that direction, we can probably go forward with that today, if you like. Final design on this project is subject to council approval of preliminary design, which we'll bring back to you in September. And final design would take the project through 2010. Construction would be totally funding dependent, and it's to be determined. Just to highlight sort of the public involvement effort, in the meeting packet, we provided you with some of the meeting minutes from the public open house that we had on the project, as well as the feedback we got from the technical review committee. The open house that we had to discuss the different alternatives was held on June the 2nd. We provided around 840 notices to the areas that's kind of highlighted in color, and the red, the 500-foot boundary on both sides of the roadways is shown in red, and the kind of the flesh colored shows all the notices that we were given to the public. The feedback that we got at the meeting, as well as at meetings with agencies, City of SeaTac, Port of Seattle, and others, kind of fall into three main areas. Those dealing with the alignment, particularly those dealing with traffic, and then kind of the timing of development. In terms of the alignment, what we heard from the neighbors was they're most interested in an alignment that did not impact their properties or the improvements that they made. That goes from Pac Stainless onto the residents on 24th. We've consistently heard that from them. We also heard from the Port of Seattle that they want to look at the pros and cons of the alignment issues. The City of SeaTac and staff levels provided us feedback that they're quite pleased that we were able to address those impacts, particularly the direct impacts on the properties themselves. In terms of traffic, we heard some from some of the residents, particularly on 24th, of concerns about truck movements. There's inadequate turning radius on some of the particular access from 24th onto 208th. And then we also heard about issues regarding the cumulative impacts of traffic growth, and this is largely from the city of SeaTac in the surrounding areas. So we kind of got that feedback from them, and that's really more development related. The timing and redevelopment issues, a number of the residents that we heard from were not so concerned or opposed to the kind of development that's going in here. They were more interested in knowing, when is it going to happen? When are we going to have an opportunity to, most of this area is planned. Most of the area is planned in the city of SeaTac and in Des Moines. If I can give you an orientation here, this is 216th, 24th, and potential extension of 24th North, potential link light rail station at this location. All of this area is pretty much planned for non-residential development. The feedback we got from the city of SeaTac in taking it before their land use and parks committee was they largely were in support of the planned land uses in the areas. Their main concern was, what are the cumulative impacts of all this development on the general areas and within the city of SeaTac in particular.
Area extended east of I-5 over to
Military Road, I-5. Their basic concern is that they really would like to see this 509 improvement kind of in this orange completed, because that relieves a lot of the traffic impacts, particularly from I-5 that's using Military Road, Pack Highway, Des Moines Memorial Drive, and so on. So they're very much kind of hedging their bets, so to speak, on getting that improvement in place. And the problem is it's not funded. So it's a huge, huge deal, particularly for SeaTac. I put this slide in here on project design objectives. We'll come back to this, but this is basically forms our kind of the basis upon which we're evaluating the different alternatives, and we'll come back to that in a second. I want to turn it over to Nelson Davis here for a couple of minutes to go over really the design context for this project, how we're proceeding, and then take you through the alternatives analysis for the different segments that is written up in your briefing packet, but I think he can give you a little more highlight on some of the reasoning behind that. So, Nelson.
Thank you, Len, and thank you all for the opportunity to present the alignment alternatives we've come up with. And this initial slide shows the overall gateway area. The red line here is 24th Avenue South, extending from 208th to 216th, and 216th from I-5 to about 18th Avenue South. And here we have really the physical gateway to Des Moines at the corner of Pack Highway and 216th. And the yellow line kind of signifies...
Let me hold you on for just a second here. Scott, did you have a question?
Do any of you have a bigger set of plans that I could look at while he speaks, so I can figure out what we're being asked? Because there's nothing that was either in the package or in this slideshow that's a sufficient detail for me to make any decision tonight.
So,
Councilmember Thomasson, we do have on the board in the back, if the council would like to take a break to look at the different alternatives. We are going to be coming back with, in some detail, on what we're trying to do is get at a preferred alignment. And as we, but I don't have anything more detailed than up there. Would you like to see those in particular?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, what we're being asked is to trade off business park, on 24th, as I understand it, is how much business park we have in Des Moines, whether we save 6 temporary residential structures in SeaTac. And you can tell by the way I asked the question where I would likely lean, that the 6 temporary structures in SeaTac are going to be sold next week to Prologis. So why should we...
These identical?
So, and I don't know what level of detail the the committee saw, and, you know, the verbal description and 1 inch. So I'll take mine.
Committee reviewed these plans.
One of those is alternative 1, the other is alternative 2.
Okay. Sorry, so I'll, so on 24th, what we're, this will be the main traffic corridor for the freight activities and retail development in Des Moines Creek Business Park and the nursery properties, and also provide a future connection to the 24th, 28th connection into SeaTac and potentially SR 509. At the south end of 24th, this green arrow is really the connection past 216 to the north central neighborhood. One of the goals of any of these alignments is to protect that neighborhood from the through traffic and keep them on the arterial. All right. We've got the physical gateway for Pack Highway. Solid yellow line is 216th. We want to bring people down into the retail developments, Des Moines Creek Business Park, and on into downtown Des Moines. And then really the area between Pack Highway and I-5 is a more residential type arterial. There's some limitations here with the capacity of the bridge over I-5, and this is more of a long-range issue that requires some additional development in Pacific Ridge and expansion of the I-5 bridge. One of the questions that came up earlier was the cross-section on this, and it's 5 lanes on all of these segments from on 216th and 24th, resulting in an overall right-of-way width of 99 feet. With these two alternatives you're looking at, we've applied that 99-foot right-of-way to the alternatives to create the symmetrical alternative, where that 99 feet is placed right on the center line of the right-of-way, versus the, off the screen here, offset alternative, where we've looked at existing land uses and other constraints in the corridor to bring this 5-lane alignment through. So in looking at these roadway segments on 24th Avenue South, the first alternative, the symmetrical alternative, results in 10 total parcel takes on the east side of the road in this area and on the other side of the Prologis and the nursery site over here. And in the offset alternative, we've shifted the alignment to the west to preserve these existing land uses, and which requires additional right-of-way on the port property. The advantage of this is that we're dealing with one property owner instead of a number of property owners and getting right-of-way, and the cost of these total parcel takes is a big stepping stone to get the process rolling. Sorry. The cost of acquiring property from 10 to 15 different property owners is quite a time constraint and cost issue compared to dealing with just a few properties.
On the Prologis dedication, what did they dedicate? What's the total width in front of Prologis today? Was it 30 plus 20, 30 plus?
They have an additional, I believe, 15 feet beyond what is currently dedicated.
So 30 plus 15,
He's saying
45?
18.
18.
Okay, so 48. So if you doubled to 48, you'd get 96. Okay.
Correct.
So that was the plan. SeaTac achieved that dedication on our behalf. Well, it was through SEPA that the dedication was made, but SeaTac being the authority that caused the dedication. Well, but it wouldn't have happened without SeaTac consent. Okay.
Carmen, did you have a question?
Yeah. if I'm using those numbers right, the offset would mean that, 18 feet of the edge of the port property on 24th and on 216th on each would need to become road right-of-way?
With the offset alignment, it would be at a maximum 39 feet.
So you're not suggesting that what Prologis did would come on south along 24th down to 216th, that the road would not be widened to that same degree on the east side?
Actually, with the offset alternative, we're holding the existing curb line that's out there today. If we were to widen it to the full 18 feet additional, that would be the first alternative, the symmetrical alternative. And when you extend that south and north of the Prologis property, it's through the front of all those homes.
But those homes, they're going to become artifacts, aren't they, as the property redevelops? I would think as soon as...
Hey, let me jump to the bottom line on this one a little bit. Quite frankly, the city of SeaTac, there are a few people in this area who don't want to redevelop. They like living where they're at. They've been there for a long time. And while SeaTac has designated the property as airport-dependent use on their comp plan, it is still zoned single-family home. And when they've tried to rezone it to their airport-dependent use, the people who own those buildings have complained, because when you do that, you create a non-conforming use. And when you have a non-conforming use, you're not allowed to do certain things on your non-conforming use. And in particular, what you can't do is expand it. You can't add a garage. You can't add a room. You can repair a roof, but it does limit what you can do on the property. And so SeaTac has withheld rezoning that property. My argument to SeaTac was, if you do the symmetrical alternative, you are going to create more of an incentive for properties to redevelop in that area than if you do the asymmetrical. However, the asymmetrical has some advantages. There are some cost advantages. There are some utility advantages, and it's further on in the presentation. So it's not as cut and dried. I understand where Councilmember Thomasson is coming from, and I understand where you're coming from too. That eventually they're going to be dinosaurs sitting in the middle of a commercial, industrial type area, and who would want to live in those homes? Well, some of these folks are saying we do. And SeaTac has been unwilling to take some aggressive steps that would result in redevelopment occurring sooner.
But suggest that buying the land from the port is going to be any cheaper than buying the land from the other side of the street.
I think what we were suggesting is, from a process standpoint, it's just going to take longer, be more difficult to do, because now you're dealing with a whole bunch of individual property owners versus one.
Well, and you're taking away their front yards if they are still living in the houses. But what point was SeaTac making to us of that extra footage on the road width on the east side where Prologis is? I mean, they started us on that path. So now they don't want to continue it north up to 208.
And remember, what the asymmetrical one doesn't say just move everything over. It says some parts, it stays where the new road center line is the same as the old road center line, and you're going to actually be shifting it. So
in the case of 24th here, it is shifted over to the west from 208 up to approximately this area. Oops, lost it. Approximately right in here. And then we transition back to a centered alignment as we approach 24th to maintain this alignment across the intersection.
So does the port willingly give up that land? Isn't that going to cost us something?
Well, we've had discussions with the port, and we've presented this to them, and those discussions will need to continue.
Very well put.
Scott? From what little information I have to work with, and making a fairly quick decision, I would say centered alignment.
And we don't necessarily need a decision tonight. If you were prepared to make one, we'd be happy to take it.
I don't
That's
think
an item
that's
on
the
the
intent here, though.
But what I'm
Well,
saying, that would be an item.
it wasn't
wouldn't
clear.
have.
Well,
Third meeting.
I thought the agenda item was make a decision.
No.
That was the last one.
This is a briefing.
Okay, okay.
When you said, are you favoring one or two?
Symmetrical.
Symmetrical for this street.
I favor the offset.
Okay.
So the issues are the same as we come around the corner onto 216th. I've broken it up into segments. This is from 18th Avenue South to 24th Avenue South. The symmetrical alignment would require basically removal and replacement of the frontage improvements in front of Pac Stainless and the post office. It would include parking impacts to the post office and similar impacts to these residential properties. There's probably only one or two that would require total parcel acquisition under the symmetrical, but there are a couple up at this end. In the offset alignment, we maintain the frontage improvements that Pac Stainless put in, that the post office has put in. That curb line really establishes that alignment and once again moves it to the port. This is a case, as Tony mentioned, the utility advantages. We're able to preserve the improvements that have been done here in the frontage area. There's a number of utility impacts and utility expansions that need to incur as part of this project. By having the shifted alignment, we have a large area of undeveloped property to work with prior to impacting the road. So we can keep traffic going on 216th, very unencumbered, do our utility installations in the wider area because we basically have a dirt road adjacent to a paved road, which speeds your construction time and therefore reduces your cost.
Basically, what the offset does, it prevents having to impact a bunch of homes and a bunch of commercial buildings, like the post office and so forth.
Correct.
And the development is being motivated by the port's development. So yeah, they suffer a little bit, but in fact, in the long run, I think they're suffering less.
Yeah, I think they have a hard time. These roadway improvements are necessary to support their infrastructure. And I think those are the discussions that need to continue to take place with the port. The next segment between 24th Avenue South, where did the mouse go, and Pac Highway with the symmetrical alignment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these apartment buildings, the Emerald Court Apartments, are affected by the widening and would require acquisition and relocation of those multifamily residents. Versus in the symmetrical alignment, we've shifted to the north to take advantage of the nursery property and then bring that alignment back once we get past Emerald Court to center up at Pacific Highway South.
You said symmetrical, you meant offset on that.
Pardon me?
You said symmetrical, you meant offset.
I meant offset, sorry.
Well, it's offset for the western half. It's symmetrical on the eastern half.
It's actually, yeah. It's offset from 24th up to till we get past Emerald Court. And then we need to line up across Pac Highway just because those are two major roads.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
The Ono property there,
Yes.
that corner, you show on your lanes, on your alternatives, and frankly, I'm agreeing with your offset for both roads. You show two left turn lanes as you come south on 24th where it hits 216th. Is that an assumption that the Ono property shouldn't have a driveway emptying onto 216th because it's too close to other things up by 99 that they would empty out onto 24th? Is that the reason why you need two left turn lanes there? Of traffic coming off of properties that flank either side of 24th?
That's a good question. Actually, the reason is that the main arterial route, I lost my mouse here. There we go. The main arterial route is coming down 24th to the south, turning up 216th.
The main arterial route for who? These 6 little houses that are up there?
Future development.
Okay, who? Who's coming south?
Des Moines Creek Business Park,
We don't want the 18-wheelers coming south. We've said that over and over and over and over. And I'm thinking that this is to help them do that.
I'm going to point to this map over here just real quick. The 24th Avenue segment here's 208th. Eventually, the idea is to connect all the way up to and tie in with the improvements that CTAC made up here. So what we want to be able to do is to protect the neighborhoods, the neighborhood feel of 24th Avenue south of 216th, where we've got 3 schools, churches, a city park, direct access from city residents. It's more of a residential kind of character down there. So what we're saying with this dual left turn lane is that we want the heavier traffic movements to come out, get back on Pacific Highway South, or cross over, go down to Military Road, get down to Kent via other alternatives other than that section of 24th Avenue south of South to 16th Street.
I'm going to interrupt for a second here. I'm kind of obligated to do this. We have 7 minutes left to our schedule.
Well, we're not going to make any decisions on this.
No, we're not. I just want to make sure you're aware of this, so if there's any council member that wishes to make an extension, they can do so at this time. Otherwise, I'll be cutting you off in 7 minutes.
And I got a letter I want you to talk about.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily interested in extending it, but if we're not going to extend it and we're going to get to that letter, which I think needs to go out, then we need to complete this discussion now, since we're not making a decision anyway. Scott's made his feelings known. Scott, is your feeling about the symmetrical versus offset the same for all of the areas that are being presented?
No, my statement was on 24th.
Okay.
Okay. That being the case,
I still would need much more detailed information to make the decision.
I agree. This is my first time taking it.
So I guess my question would be, how are you going to make those information available to us so that we can be more informed the next time we have a meeting?
I'll have to sit down with staff and put a packet of information together for you.
I fully understand that the committee knows exactly what's going on here. I'm not a member of that committee, and 3 other people are not.
I'd like to make a final comment on this.
Pardon me? I can't hear
I'd
you.
make a final comment on this if I could.
You have exactly 1 minute to do that in.
Okay, my final comment is that the offset is designed primarily for 24th to be used north for any trucks that are going, but going south for people that have gone into the business park and making that left turn on 216. They're going to have an access.
Are you talking about the SeaTac Port Business Park, or are you talking about Ono and Fernie eventually?
I was talking about the SeaTac Port Business Park.
Well, if they developed the way that they were going to have traffic coming out from the retail part down closer to the post office. They weren't coming out on 24th.
Well, but they are going to have access to 24th, I mean, by definition. The trucks are supposed to go north.
Right. I'm trying to pin people down to say that's the intention, that the trucks continue to go north.
Well, that's loud and clear from this point of view over here, Carmen. All right, I no longer have any further time for that discussion. Thank you. This will be ongoing. All right, the last item is a letter that you've already requested that be brought to you for this council meeting. So I'm going to open that up for discussion at this time. I saw Susan first and then Scott second.
Okay, I guess there's some suppositions being made here I don't understand, but, I hope this isn't cast in stone that, we've all agreed that this light rail should be on the freeway, in my mind. I think we do. Are we going to, you're requesting here that they come and give us a presentation and tell us this information that we don't know, that we're out of the loop on? Is that what we're really asking them to do? Or we're telling them that we want to put it on the freeway? Because I'm not in favor of that. And I would not want this letter to go out and say that.
Here's what I see. This is to accomplish 2 things. One is to let Sound Transit know that if they are working with CTAC on the possibility of a 24th alignment, we now know and we want to talk. We want to be part of that discussion because 24th from 208 down to 216th is in our city, even though parts of it border the city of CTAC. And if they don't know that CTAC is thinking about this, we want to put them on notice that, hey, somebody might be going down a road, pun intended, that you really need to know about. I think the other thing it does is, for the moment, it reiterates the City Council's position that light rail should go down I-5. However, that third paragraph we have added in, the Council has discussed other alignment possibilities and is willing to talk about them. But right now, our current position is the I-5-509 corridor.
Can I ask a question?
I have to go by
Okay.
order here. We've got Scott next, then Dan and Carmen.
Okay.
You'll follow.
I think sending a letter at this point is premature. We're going by hearsay, innuendos, and instead of firing a letter, we should pick up the phone and make invite Sound Transit. I would rather invite Sound Transit to a study session and talk to them about all of this stuff. And during that, we can raise the question, what do you know about this? And
I totally agree.
This is throwing a grenade at CTAC, which I don't never needs to be thrown.
I agree.
And I guess the one other thing that I'll go ahead and mention is some of the email traffic that was going about with council members CCing council members shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, you're
because
right.
that's too much like
And I'm guilty of
a
that.
non-meeting. So, I'll just say that. And we can all remember that you shouldn't send an email to all 7 council members because that's inappropriate.
But I totally agree with Scott on what he just said. I don't think this letter should go out.
And in the future, I'll remind you of that when I send you emails.
Yeah, well, at least, yeah, so, but I think it's reacting too quickly for something that we don't know enough about. So that would have been my email had I played the game, but, I knew that was inappropriate.
And I have no problem picking up the phone and calling Joni Earl and seeing what she
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we need a letter.
I totally agree.
Okay.
Extend the meeting.
And Dan?
Thank you. While I agree with Scott that any email that I sent was inappropriate, and I will not do that again. I will attempt not to do that
Well,
again.
now you let the cat out of the bag as to who that was. Huh?
That's all right.
No, there were 5 I saw.
Anyway, I apologize for that, and Scott is absolutely correct. I favor sending the letter. I don't even think it's strong enough where it says the City of Des Moines has not approved the Sound Transit light rail alignment coming down 24th. I think that's too passive. I would say does not approve.
I'm going to move to extend for 5 minutes.
Second.
Motion made, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, go ahead. Continue, Dan.
So I would make it even firmer. I'd like to establish a written record. I think it's good.
Okay. Carmen, you're next.
Okay. I need to, the study session with them here talking to us is what I would like too, but I'd like to talk something broader than what I think we're talking about. There have been some recent things in the paper about the amount of pollution because of all of the massive roads and airline travel right north-south along us. There were plans years ago that there might eventually be a bullet train down I-5. It was called Cascadia Plant. Went from Canada to Oregon. If I-5 is going to be used for something, it should be used for long-distance travel, not for. I don't understand what the light rail is. Is it really on rails, and are they at ground level or are they elevated?
It is on rail. It can be both.
Because how can you cannot? They have to.
The best way to describe it is think of a subway system that you've been on.
Okay,
It's that kind of
but
equipment.
unless it's buried, which I doubt we're talking about. We're talking about elevation changes and direction changes that have to be done very, very gradually, I would think. If anything's on a rail, just I can't see something shifting from 24th to 99 or to 30th or to I-5 and back again here and there being a practical thing to talk about. There's got to be a smooth transition going.
So, Carmen, you're not in favor of the letter?
I'm not in favor of 24th, and I don't think 30th is even practical. I don't know where you would get onto 30th from coming from the north.
Okay.
You'd have to cut right through Mansion Hills and take out houses there. Because you can't do a right angle turn on a rail line.
You can, but it takes a distance to do it.
Well, I mean,
Yeah. Ed, you're next.
I think that a letter is called for because this, they told us that the light rail might come down 24th. The CTAC Council, certain members of it at least, are leaning, have hinted that. I think it's time we tell them we don't want it. And doing so in a discussion session will take a while to set up and may or may not get results. I think we should document it. And if we don't have a discussion session, fine, but let's get the letter out.
Scott?
So, I've suggested that we have a tour of what's built, because clearly as you see it going up 518 from South Center to Burien is a good picture of what it is. I wouldn't have any problem with the light rail coming down 28th and then turning on 509. That may be what they're talking about. See, I don't think we know enough of what they're talking about to slam it.
Okay.
And, I was in San Diego last week. I wasn't able to attend the birthday party because I was out of town. I was on the 31st floor of the Hyatt, and it's across the street from the rail system, and when you're sitting there, you can hear that rail system 31 floors below go by it, every time a train goes by. So, we probably don't want this in town, but,
Underground.
I don't think, until we have an appreciation for what it is, I don't think we know what we want or where we want it.
Well, Dan just reminded me that what the council member, actually the mayor of CTAC, said at the committee meeting we were at was an alignment down 24th from their station on 200th all the way to Highline Community College.
Okay, then, but is that an individual council member? I've heard council members talk Highway 99 alignment.
He's the one who made the comment. I didn't hear any of the staff or any of the other council members say, well, wait a minute, Mayor, that's very speculative, and that's your opinion. Nobody made any comment about it at all.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, everyone has weighed in. Let me just tell you what I'm saying here. There are not enough votes for a letter to be sent, okay? And even if I did weigh in, which I'm not going to do, it would not pass this evening. And there's one council member that's absent. So this is a no right now, as I see it. Okay?
So I will, or staff will contact Sound Transit and just say, hey, this is what we heard from CTAC. Tell us what you've heard, what you know. And then we'll get you information about that.
And if you can confirm it, I have no problem sending a letter.
Got it.
10-4. Okay, council, you're right on time then. That concludes our evening meeting. The next meeting will be a special meeting on June 27th. We are adjourned.